38,315,459 cases currently in the world. That's a big number. And I was sort of going back to refresh my memory a little bit about the Spanish flu and what the comparison was. So over the duration of the entire Spanish flu, there were about 500 million people that got sick, which was 1/3 of the world's population at the time. And that 20 million, somewhere between 20 million and 50 million probably were from the Spanish flu. And that may actually have been a much higher number because they didn't have as good record keeping then as we do perhaps now. But globally right now, there are about 8,415,000 active cases, and 1% of those cases are considered to be critical. So that's people that are in requiring an advanced level of medical care. So in Canada, we are at 186,332 new cases. So definitely on target to hit 200,000 in the next probably couple weeks. And then the total number of new cases today was 1,945, which is a big number. The majority of those are in Quebec and Ontario, and a smaller number are in BC and Alberta. So, you know, I was watching the numbers in Ontario, and I'm still watching the numbers in Ontario, and the numbers are rising. I think, like a lot of people, I got a little bit anxious when I saw that the numbers had gone over 900 in a single day. So there was one day where the numbers were well over 900. And that was a bit of a stressful day because I sort of wondered about that number, whether that was the leading edge of a really dramatic exponential rise in the number of cases. But I think it's important to put some of those numbers in context. We are definitely seeing increasing numbers in the province without a doubt, but those super huge spikes, like the 940 new cases across the province, the 50 new cases in Halton in single days, were probably at least in part related to a huge backlog of tests that just all kind of got dumped into the system on one day, and then were reported as sort of new that day. So the trend is upwards, probably more in the 700 to 800 new cases per day, and rising for sure, but not dramatically in that, we're going to have 1,000, 1,500 new cases, then 2,000 new cases, then 2,500 new cases, then 3,000 new cases. But today, every day, there are a few new cases in intensive care units, and there are a few new cases on ventilators, which is, again, people who were getting sick a few weeks ago and sort of caught up in those first sort of increases of numbers of cases, now getting much sicker and needing more intensive care. And that number will probably continue to rise as well. So in Ontario, the majority of those cases are in Toronto, Peel, Ottawa, and York. By a long shot. And so the province has responded to that. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So a little bit closer to home for Halton, in the sort of 20 to 30 new cases per day, which is a big change from later in this, we were in the single digits. And one school in Halton that has an outbreak right now as well. So that's St. Francis of Assisi Elementary School, which is in Georgetown. So there are definitely schools all throughout Halton that have cases of COVID-19 in them. We got our first email from Burlington Central notifying us of a case of COVID-19 at the school. But our daughter, Lyndon, who attends Burlington Central, wasn't considered to be a close contact of that child. So we continue to just monitor her and watch her symptoms. But St. Francis of Assisi has 6 active cases of COVID-19, and what makes that an outbreak compared to just a school that has one case is that it's likely that the transmission of the virus happened at school. So those kids probably were exposed to the virus at school as opposed to being at home. So that's what makes that an outbreak. The village of Tansley Woods is the long-term care retirement home that's currently most affected by COVID-19, if people have been sort of following that in the news. Right now, there is an outbreak there, and there were 14 residents and 6 staff that were infected with COVID-19, and the transmission likely happened at the long-term care facility. And 2 residents have died. I did find a story about that. It was a husband and wife who passed away from COVID-19 within hours of one another. They were able to spend the last with palliative care and support at Tansley Woods, but that is definitely the sort of largest outbreak currently happening in long-term care in Halton. And I guess New Brunswick is in the news a lot this week as well with its rising cases of COVID-19. New Brunswick had gone a very long time with very few cases, sort of 1 or 2 new cases a day, primarily in people who were coming into the province from outside of the province. But they also have had an outbreak at a long-term care facility in Moncton that has so far affected 19 residents. And there are also cases of COVID-19 in a number of other regions as well. Still, I wasn't able to find really any word on where that came from, but again, likely it's from travel outside of Atlantic Canada and people coming into the province and passing on COVID-19. You know, and the 14 days is good science, right, in terms of self-isolation and the time that people need to stay isolated, but it's not perfect. There are rare cases of people having contagious COVID-19 after the 14 days. So, you know, it's maybe easy to jump to blame about somebody doing things wrong, but sometimes you can do everything right and still end up with transmission of this disease. The strategies that we have, distancing, masking, hand washing, small social circles, testing, they're all good, but none of them are perfect. So that's something that New Brunswick is struggling with right now. And again, it's a vulnerable population because they've had very few cases of COVID-19 right from the very beginning. So a lot of people that are at risk of getting it, and also an elderly and less healthy population. So Dr. Jennifer Russell, who's their Chief Medical Officer of Health, has clamped down very hard on the province. Any of the regions that are in the orange zone, for example, are not allowed to do door-to-door trick-or-treating. So no door-to-door trick-or-treating in Moncton, no door-to-door trick-or-treating in Campbellton. So I guess that maybe I thought it might be talk a little bit about Halloween. Talk a little bit about some of the changes to some of the regions in Ontario. Toronto and Ottawa and Peel, in a lot of ways, have returned back to phase 2. So indoor dining is now not allowed in those regions. Gyms and bars and fitness centers and dance studios have all closed. Convention centers have all closed. Movie theaters have closed, and so, you know, there are still there are lots of retail outlets that are open, but really any place where people were indoors without masks on are now closed for the foreseeable future. So 28 days, and then kind of to be reevaluated on a day-to-day, on a month-by-month basis. And I guess we haven't moved yet to that in Halton, but it is also important to recognize that there are rising numbers of cases in Halton as well. And for me, maybe beyond the laws and the rules and the guidelines is starting to sort of ask those questions again about what's essential. You know, what are the essential trips out? What are the things that we have to do? And what are the things that are kind of optional that carry a higher risk, even if it's still okay according to the provincial guidelines? And whether it's sort of, you know, worthwhile to make those decisions at this point. Small changes, I think I talked about this last week, but again, just to kind of reiterate it, rethinking safe social circles. And so, you know, the guidance from the province is for people to, again, consider limiting their contacts to immediate family, so those who live within their own household, and not to bubble with other families. Again, with kids going off to school and having all of those interactions at school, you know, more and more people in the workplace, rising numbers of cases, those safe social circles maybe are not ideal. Because what a safe social circle was is those are the people that you can hug, those are the people that you can sit with, those are the people that you can share a meal with, those are the
Uh-oh. Hey, Anna. Mhm. Hello.
Oops, it froze up.
Somehow we've frozen up there. So I don't know. My Thanksgiving was pretty quiet this weekend, but I did see my kid. My son and his girlfriend came by, and they were visiting other people too. So it was as small and quiet as it was at our house. It was on my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, we had our son and two boys. They were out back, outside. I mean, we were all outside, but I wish it was as nice today as
It's kind of cold to eat.
Yeah, kind of cold to eat.
Yeah.
But yeah, but masks and everything now. So
Evelyn, can you hear us now?
Just shake your head.
Oh, hold on. There we go. I don't know. It looks like she can hear us, so that's a good thing. So
I don't know what that was.
that's okay. Anna, we filled up the time.
Yeah. Okay, so self-isolation applies to people that have symptoms. It applies if someone in your household has COVID-19, has been actually diagnosed with COVID-19, or has been told that they are a probable case of COVID-19. So if someone in your house just has symptoms or has COVID testing pending, they need to self-isolate, but if you are asymptomatic, you do not. Okay, so you can go to school, you can go into the workplace, you can, as long as you're, obviously following recommendations in terms of physical distancing and masking and that sort of thing. So it was getting challenging for parents to sort of, manage that situation with keeping asymptomatic siblings, kids with runny noses home, and it was determined that's if someone can sort of mask and maintain social distancing, that was considered to be a relatively low risk situation if they were asymptomatic, but someone in their household was waiting for testing. Okay. So those are kind of the big changes. Halloween. So Halloween has not been canceled as of right now, okay? Unless you live in parts of New Brunswick. And some of the sort of local public health authorities in places where there are really, really high numbers are recommending against sort of in-person Halloween parties and that sort of thing. So Ottawa Public Health has come out encouraging people to do Zoom Halloween parties and not do door-to-door trick-or-treating, but it hasn't been canceled. So some of the things that Theresa Tam is recommending are to make sure that people are maintaining social distancing when they're out trick-or-treating, so 6 feet between families, only accepting pre-packaged treats, okay? Staying outside, incorporating masks into your costume in creative ways, handing out candy on things like hockey sticks or broomsticks, or with tongs, or maybe catapults, or tossing them into people's bags from fairly far away. And those guidelines, I think, are probably the ones that are going to apply in places where the risk of transmission is still relatively low. So, obviously rural Manitoba is going to be a little bit of a different situation than downtown Toronto, right? So communities where percentage positives are in the 5 to 10%, and there's high numbers of people getting sick. Door-to-door trick-or-treating is maybe not the best idea, but it is something that people can still consider in this area, as long as they are sort of being strategic about how to keep it safe. But again, everybody has their own sort of risk tolerance. And so for people that are maybe a little bit older and a little bit more frail and a little bit more concerned about that, maybe skipping the door-to-door trick-or-treating this year. But if you are the grandparents of little people who are asking for some ideas about Halloween, then those are some suggestions. A couple of articles that Dr. Tam has spoken about what Halloween might look like this year, which are really helpful. But again, that's October 13th. Right? We'll have to see a little bit closer to the time. But still, indoor Halloween parties with lots of people and not masking is not a good idea. So that's kind of the update this week. People have questions. I mean, there was a little bit of news about sort of a large vaccine trial that was paused due to a complication. I don't know if that's something that people are interested in. I can talk about that, but yeah, any questions?
I might have a question if nobody else is.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks there was talk of me. I've got lawn chairs in my car, and maybe I'd be able to go and pop out and visit some folks from church outside, you know, whatever. It's cool and it's been windy, so that's not great. But how are we feeling about that when we're supposed to be shrinking our bubbles and deciding what's essential?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, essential is such a tricky thing, and it's going to be so personal. I mean, for some people, essential is really just having that one trip out to the grocery store that they do once a week with their mask on, and that's it. That's all they're going to do. They're not going to do any other interactions. I mean, we know that outdoor encounters, if you're staying 6 feet away from somebody and you have masks on, or preferably if you can even sit further away from somebody than that, those are very safe encounters. There's very, very rarely has there been any reported sort of transmission of the virus under those circumstances, right? This thing spreads in close quarters, crowded places with lots and lots of people who can't move around. So, you know, I think that those sort of physically distant outdoor gatherings can be done very, very safely. And my general philosophy, because I'm a camper and a hiker, is there's no such thing as bad weather. Just poor clothing choices.
That's true for me, but I grew up in a house with a grandma and another grandma and aunties and my mom saying, "Get a sweater, it's cold."
So, and one of the things that, you know, I've been thinking about is there are a lot of outdoor fire bylaws in Halton region, and some places where you're not allowed to have an outdoor fire, as in Burlington right now, and that might be a small but interesting piece of advocacy for people to think about, because one of the things that would extend our ability to be outdoors would be the ability to stay warm outdoors, and an outdoor fire is actually a great way to do that, right? So so that's something that we're thinking about in our household, is how we could potentially continue to have fires, because those propane heaters are few and far between. They're very hard to come by.
Oh yeah, gone.
Yeah. So
The magic high dosage flu shots I guess they're in very short supply, because I was calling around and they run out. They only get a small number, so I don't know how to hold off to get that, or is it better to just take whatever's there, and you can't take two?
I wish I had a really good answer to that right now. My dog is barking. My apologies. I don't have a great answer for that right now. It is actually something that's on my to-do list to kind of read about over the next few days, to see just how good our tetra, like the quad lower dose flu vaccine is for our older patients, because that we're finding ourselves in that situation as well. So leave that question with me and I will come back to that. Obviously we're very early in the flu season right now. So I think it's okay to kind of to sort of, you know, see if you can get high dose in the next couple of weeks. But I think if we really can't get more of it, we're going to have to figure out a way to justify, to get the lower dose to our older patients, for sure. Yeah.
Is he chewing on the chair leg or your leg?
She is not chewing on the chair leg. What she's done is she has brought down her ball, and she has thrown her ball under my chair. And she expects me to throw it back.
Darn computers! They just don't understand that the computers can possibly be.
So she wants to play, and she does not want me to talk anymore. All right.
Thanks again, Anna.
My pleasure.
Wow.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Oh, she had to go.
Well,